Hey, you guys, how are you? Okay, so I connected a little bit early, maybe just a minute early, just to make sure we were going. If you are on and can see this video right now, I would love for you to say hello in the chat and maybe tell me where you're from. That would be a great way for me to know that you guys are seeing this video. I'm using StreamYard, so it's not always easy to know who's watching unless you leave a comment in the chat. So that would be awesome. I'm going to wait just a second because it doesn't look like anybody's on just yet, so I'm going to be patient. Okay, there you guys are. I can see you now hopping on. So if you'll tell me in the chat, just maybe your name and where you're from, that would be awesome. That will help me know that you're hearing me and that you can see me. And then we'll get started. I'm so excited that you guys are here. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time for the things after you put them in for them to actually show up. So I'm going to try to be patient. While you guys are checking in, I'm going to share my screen. Hey, Denise. All right. I'm so glad you're here. You guys just keep sharing away while I get all pulled up here. Okay. Now we should be good to go. North Richland Hills. Hey, Laura. So excited that you're here. I am looking so forward to this conversation, talking specifically about passion projects, Genius Hour, first summer webinar of the summer. I cannot wait to learn with you guys. Hey, Colleen, it's good to see you. Oh, it's Annie. I was like, I know that face. Like, that does not look like, who is Colleen? Hello, Annie. How are you? It's so good to see you. So funny. I was just thinking in my head, like, that's not her name. Hey, Amy, Heather, it's good to see you guys. All right, so you guys keep checking in. As you do, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing. And, you know, like I said, I'm really excited to talk about this idea of utilizing passion projects and Genius Hours specifically to identify and serve gifted learners. But regardless of what you do in the classroom, I think you'll find tonight's webinar helpful because we're going to talk about the process of Genius Hour, how to do it in a manageable and meaningful way. And regardless of whether you serve gifted learners in a general education classroom, if you have a pull-out program, we're going to talk about all of the things. So I am just so excited that you guys are here, and I am looking forward to learning with you. This will be recorded. It'll be on YouTube for a limited amount of time. So I just want to make sure that you guys know that. I'll be sharing it out in an email with the resources. We had kind of an unexpected emergency in our neighborhood today, and so I wasn't able to get the notes page done, but I will be taking the notes for you guys and sending you a note page later this evening or early tomorrow morning. So you can look forward to that and know that I'm not just going to leave you hanging. I'll make sure that you have notes and things that you can use after the webinar. All right. All of that being said, let's get started. One of the things that I think is so important for us to say out loud right now is this idea of gifted learners are not fine. I think that there's been this mindset for a long time that, you know, our struggling learners oftentimes need extra support, and they need so much of us that we sometimes can start to assume that, well, our gifted learners are fine, right? Or even our high achievers, like they're good, they don't need extra support, and nothing could be further from the truth. And so on tonight's webinar, what I want to really talk about is how do we find meaningful ways to serve our gifted learners that is also manageable for us as educators. Because the reality is, no matter where our learners are in their journey, whether they're struggling, whether they are just kind of where they need to be, or they're well above where they need to be, they all need to be seen and supported. But how do we make that happen when there's only one of us, right? What does that look like? And so as we kind of talk through this, I want to make sure that I say out loud, gifted learners are not fine, and it's time for us to really start considering how we can serve them in meaningful ways. As I was kind of preparing for tonight's webinar and thinking through, like, where do I start? I do so many Genius Hour webinars, and it's tempting to want to just jump right into the passion project conversation and how amazing it is and how wonderful it is and how it changed everything for me as an educator. But a lot of you have heard that story. And if you haven't, just know that I was in a really dark place as an educator, and I needed something different, something that would give me my passion back for teaching, and something that would make my classroom a place where my learners would want to be. But as I was preparing, I started thinking, like, I kind of want this webinar to be different. I kind of want to be really honest about where we are with gifted education and why I think Genius Hour is the answer to that. So I thought, let's just start with the challenges, right? Let's start with some of the challenges that we're facing in gifted education. So I'm going to give you guys a second, if you don't mind, in the chat. Will you tell me specifically some challenges that you see in meeting the needs of your gifted learners, or just gifted learners in general being served on your campus or in your district? So just share in the chat, what are some challenges, or maybe they're not even happening on your campus or in your district. Maybe it's just a challenge that you see in our overall educational system. So I'm going to give you guys a second to answer that question. A lot of y'all know I'm not a fan of awkward silence, so I'll wait as long as I can. What are some challenges that you see right now happening when it comes to serving gifted learners well? Hey, you guys, lots of people from Texas tonight. That's exciting. I'm always happy to see you guys. It's good, Marie. Curriculum doesn't always allow time for differentiation. Perfect. And when it does allow time for differentiation, oftentimes it's scaffolding, or it's really thinking through, how can we help if they don't understand? And sometimes we need to think, what do we do if they do understand? Considered a status symbol. Yeah, like getting my kid into the gifted program is a priority, not always because it's what they need, but because it will look good, right? Never a good idea. That's awesome, Annie. Meeting the needs of multilingual GT students, and even identifying those kids, right? Getting them into gifted services, I think, is sometimes a challenge. Differentiation, parents want the students to do more than the kids want to do because they want the A's. Yeah, it's so true. Extensions, right? How do we give them meaningful extensions without it being busy work? Time, yeah, all the things. Gosh, if you're thinking about extensions right now and you're like, what do I do? I promise you, we're going to talk about We're going to talk about Genius Hour as an extension tonight and how it can be a really meaningful extension. So stay on, don't leave. Focusing on struggling students is holding our gifted learners back sometimes. Absolutely. GT students getting their needs met in the general education classroom, and finding time for twice exceptional or multi-exceptional students. It's so true, Rebecca. Such a great point. Okay, so let me tell you some of the challenges that I thought about, very similar to what you guys thought through. When we think about identification challenges, identifying our gifted learners, I think of underrepresentation, right? Our lower socioeconomic learners are sometimes not identified because they don't stand out in the same way that some of our gifted learners do. Different cultures, different backgrounds. The reality is giftedness looks different for those kids. And so being willing to see beyond that traditional good grades, compliant behavior, all those things that very rarely actually represent giftedness is important. And so that underrepresentation of specific populations is something that we have to say out loud and we have to consider. Twice exceptionality, right? I think sometimes, gosh, this is hard to say out loud, but I think we have to. I think sometimes at school, we're so focused on fixing our students' weaknesses or what we consider to be a weakness that we miss the strength, or we miss the gift that's staring us right in the face, right? They have this amazing gift, this amazing ability, and we miss that because we're so busy trying to fix what we think is wrong with them. And so really thinking through, how do we identify those kids when right now they're not being seen? And then you guys, gosh, I travel all over the country, especially during the summer, and I talk to kids, I talk to gifted learners, I talk to parents of gifted learners, families, and I talk to teachers of gifted learners. And I will tell you that more than probably ever before, one of the things that I keep seeing over and over again from all of those groups is just a misunderstanding of what giftedness is, right? Like not understanding that giftedness is not guaranteed success. It does not mean that they should be on the A honor roll every 6 weeks. It does not mean that they're going to love school. A lot of times those are your high achievers. And to be honest, I think if we were to visit a lot of gifted programs around our country right now, we would walk out of that gifted program and be like, wow, that is a group of high achievers, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. There are gifted learners that are high achievers, and there are high achievers that are gifted, but that being a high achiever does not always mean that you're gifted, and being gifted does not always mean that you're a high achiever. And I think that's really important, because I see kids all the time that I wonder, why are they being missed? And more often than not, it's because there's a misunderstanding of what giftedness is and what giftedness isn't. All right, so we talked about the identification challenges. I would say I'm with you guys on a lot of the service challenges. How do, once they're identified, right? Once we figure out who they are, how do we then how do we then serve them well, right? Not just serve them, but serve them well. I think, first of all, like a lot of you said, there's a lack of differentiation. I think even in gifted programs, there tends to be a one size fits all approach. Like, this is what we do, this is how we serve gifted learners. And one of the things we're going to talk about in a second is giftedness is such a broad spectrum. There are so many things that can be happening within a gifted learner that one size fits all approach just won't fit. It's like, I always give this example. Like, if you walked in to a store to buy a pair of jeans, right? And you walked in and they sold one size, one style, what would you probably do? You guys tell me in the chat. If you walked in, without cussing, right? Some of us would have a few choice words to say, but if you walked into a store, they sold one size, one style of jeans, what would you probably do? Oh man, Annie, I love that. Yep, so good. Mm-hmm. You would 100% walk out, right? And I think we're seeing that in a lot of our gifted programs, right? A lot of kids, a lot of gifted learners are opting out of their gifted program because they're saying, hey, you know what? I'm not really looking to do extra work. I'm not really looking to just figure out extra problems or do an extra project. And the parents are like, I'm not looking to go buy 10 trifolds during the year, right? Take that from a gifted mom. Like, there has to be this moment where we realize gifted services have to be valuable, and that one size fits all approach, I think we would all agree, just isn't. And then consistency in services, like making sure that they are served well and consistently, and gifted education not just happening when it's convenient or when we're doing it to check a box. And so, gosh, I know so many schools, I want to be honest, I know so many schools that are doing it well. But I also know that across the board, there are a lot of schools that are struggling with this. And I don't think that by and large, we're struggling with it because we don't respect gifted learners or because we are trying to be jerks. Like, I think by and large, it's because we think there has to be this specific model, or there have to be all of these things in place to serve all of these types of giftedness. And because we can't do all of those things, we just don't do anything. And I just don't think that's the case. And that's what I hope to help you understand tonight, is that it's not as hard as I think we're making it, honestly. And I think Genius Hour is the answer. I'm not going to lie. Like, I think Genius Hour can help so much with this. Look, when we had the thing happen in our neighborhood earlier that I needed to go do, I was working on this slide. So I would ask you guys to forgive the font difference. But whatever we do in gifted services, in order for it to be sustainable, it has to be these two things, right? It has to be manageable and it has to be meaningful. And if it's not manageable for the teacher and it's not meaningful for the learners, the reality is it's not going to be sustainable. That is true of anything that we do in the classroom. But specifically, when we think about gifted services, I think there are a lot of programs that start out with a lot of steam and excitement and everybody's jazzed. But then when we don't intentionally think through, wait, how are we going to do this when things get hard? How are we going to do this so that it's manageable for the teacher in charge? And how are we going to do this so that it's meaningful and that our learners buy in and want to be a part of the program as well? I don't know. You guys tell me, is that something that you're struggling with a little bit? Like, having kids understand why the things that you do in gifted services is meaningful, and then also finding ways to manage it. Even if you're in the classroom in a general education classroom, do you have a hard time creating meaningful extensions that your kids want to do and that they don't just feel like it's extra work? I'm gonna pause for a second and see how you guys feel about that. Amber says yes. Okay, perfect. I just never want to say, I never want to make an assumption that isn't true, but just based on the things that I've seen, this is something that is very common. And I think that's key too, to realize that we really are all in this together, that this isn't a problem that is unique to one or two districts. It's something that we're figuring out right now in education together. So, look, I'll be honest. I didn't write this definition of a passion project. ChatGPT wrote this definition of a passion project, but it's a really good definition. So, I want to give you guys a second to read it, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so when we think about this perspective of a passion project, and if this idea is completely new to you, it really came from some companies, Google being the most popular, not the first, but the most popular to implement this idea of passion projects. And there were a group of educators, so Galitz V, Denise Krebs, Joy Kerr, AJ Giuliani, Hugh McDonald, they came together and they said, hey, what if we took this idea that these companies are using and we made it a reality in the classroom? And they wrote something called the Genius Hour Manifesto. And people like me are very thankful for that group of educators, because I have no doubt, had they not written that Genius Hour Manifesto and made this something that could be implemented in the classroom, I would not have stayed in education 100%. So, as we think about this idea of a passion project, it really is an individualized undertaking. So, thinking about this idea of every kid has individual interests or things that they want to do. They have deep interests, enthusiasm, like we want them to be excited about it or jazzed about it. And then thinking about that idea of passion, right? Now, when we think about our learners who are K1 and 2, they may not know what they're passionate about, but they have those things that they're really interested in. One thing that I want to make very clear and that we're going to talk about this evening is I remember when I first started Genius Hour. And to be honest, I had kids who were like, I like to build with Legos. And so during Genius Hour, they built with Legos. I would tell you today that that's not the most meaningful way to do Genius Hour. I'm not sure that I would even call that a Genius Hour project. That was more like indoor recess. And so tonight, I want to talk about the difference between the two and how we really do this in a meaningful way. So, does that help you guys, that definition, kind of understand what a passion project is, or at least what it should be? Okay, so now that we've talked about what it is, let's talk a little bit about what it isn't. I want to go over some of these Genius Hour myths, because I think since being implemented and being talked about, Genius Hour has gotten quite the reputation. There's lots of conversation around it. I think for the most part, people know what it is. They just aren't sure what it isn't. And so I thought, hey, let's talk about this and let's just clear the air and talk about what it's not. So Genius Hour is just free time in the classroom. That is a myth. When done well, Genius Hour is an opportunity for our learners to practice life-ready skills. It's an opportunity for them to apply the content that's being learned, right? DOK level 4. It's also an opportunity for them to learn from others and to really spend time with other gifted learners, other experts. It's just so much more than free time in the classroom. And honestly, using my model, the 6 P's of Genius Hour, there is a framework. There are things that they are expected to do. So while, yes, it is sort of unstructured, and I guess you could say that some of the time is free time, but when done well, it is so much more than that. And I think it's important to say that out loud. We're going to come back to the second one. Hold on. Genius Hour is only for gifted learners. False. Here's why I say that. Because gifted learners, I think Genius Hour makes so much sense for them. And we're going to talk about that tonight. Using Genius Hour as a curriculum to serve gifted learners, in my mind, makes all the sense in the world. But I think doing it in a classroom as an extension, right? Or doing it when you guys have an opportunity, Genius Hour gives us an opportunity to identify some of our gifted learners, because some of their gifts we're never going to see if we're just looking for them to do a worksheet well, or we're just looking for them to do well in math class. That may never happen. But I will tell you this, there are kids sitting in your classroom right now that may never pass a unit test. They may never do well on a worksheet, but they can go home and put a car back together, or they can go home and speak 3 languages, and that's giftedness too. Right? But you're never going to see those things if the opportunity isn't given, because you don't go home with those kids. So if all they're expected to do at school is play the school game, then that's all we're ever going to see. Obviously, I'm really passionate about that. Genius Hour requires a ton of time and resources. False, you guys. I taught at a really small rural district. We did not have a ton of time, nor did we have a ton of resources, but we were able to make Genius Hour work within the constraints that we had. And so basically, my story is that I ultimately decided to use Genius Hour as my gifted curriculum. It is what my students did in their gifted pullout program. And I was able to weave the standards and the things that they needed to be learning into that experience. Finally, Genius Hour is impossible to manage. I have people say to me all the time, like, gosh, Andy, I serve, 35 kids. Or if you teach high school, I serve 150 kids. I don't know how I would ever manage that many projects. There are ways to do it, and there are ways to do it that make sense. And we're going to talk about some of those this evening. Let's go back to that second one. Genius Hour is just a fancy research project. I want to talk about the difference between a Genius Hour project and a research project. Do you guys feel like, before I go to the next slide, do you feel like sometimes those are confused? Even if you understand the difference, maybe your kids don't. Like sometimes their Genius Hour projects turn into research projects. What do you guys think about that? Is that pretty common? I hate the lagging in the comments because this is just awkward silence, but I know you guys are commenting, so I'm going to be patient. Yeah, Amy says yes. Perfect. I feel like that's a big misunderstanding, like knowing the difference between Genius Hour and a research project. So let's just talk about the difference. I think this is important to say out loud. A research project results in information. A Genius Hour project results in action. So absolutely, gosh, Annie, yeah, I think the difference could be student interest too. But I think they could also do a research project on somebody they're interested in, right? You could say, hey, pick a president that you're most interested in and do a project on that. I think that when we think about passion projects, it's the outcome or the results that make it different than a research project. So in my mind, when I think about the difference, a research project results in information, and there's nothing wrong with the research project. There is definitely a place for that. But a Genius Hour project gives our learners the opportunity to research. But as a result of that research, there is action that needs to be taken. There is something that they need to do. And gosh, Jennifer, absolutely. I like to call it the research loop. Sometimes my students will be like, I'm researching. And I was like, at some point, you got to move past the research stage and do something. But that was so different than what they had been expected to do. It took us a while to get on board with that. Absolutely. A call to action. Like, what is it that you want to impact, or what is it that you want to change? That's really what we're looking to get at here. Okay, so oh gosh, when we think about gifted showcases or any showcase really where our students are demonstrating what they've done, if all it is, and I'm just going to get really honest here, and remember, I'm talking to myself too. I didn't always do Genius Hour well, but I will say there were things that I've learned, and one of the things that I've learned is that a Genius Hour showcase should not look like this, right? Every kid shouldn't have the exact same demonstration of their learning. It should be very different, right? Some of your kids are going to have a physical prototype, artifact, like something that they're showing that's physical. Some of them may have a digital product. Some of them may have an experiential product. Today I was sharing with LAUSD and somebody asked, like, what is the best product that you ever had? And remember, this is the best. I had a lot of products that weren't great. So I want to be clear about that. But one of the best products I had was I had a student who created a 5K for our community to run to raise money for animal shelters. And so was that super meaningful and had a huge impact? Absolutely. But her project or her presentation and her product looked very different than somebody who would have created a model volcano. So do you get my point? Like, it's time for GT showcases for it not to be every single one we go to has the exact same layout and looks the exact same way. I just don't think that really showcases the learning journey as well as something like passion projects or Genius Hour may be able to do. Not that there's anything wrong with trifolds, but I do think it's something to consider. Okay, so let's talk about this idea because I love this so much. You guys tell me in the chat, how many of you have heard of Robert Sternberg and his work around transactional versus transformational giftedness? Anybody? I have just recently stumbled upon this idea and I am 100% obsessed. And I think you're going to find out why here very soon. Transactional versus transformational giftedness. If you guys, is that something you're familiar with? Oscar sends a question mark. That's how I felt when I first heard about it. April says she is not. Hey, April, how are you? It's good to see you. Okay, so let's talk about it. I always love to share something new. So Robert Sternberg has done this work around the idea of transactional versus transformational giftedness. And he says, sorry, I keep having to go back and forth between my slides. He says a transactionally gifted individual is identified as gifted and then is expected to give something back in return. He gives the example that, a kid is labeled gifted and then they're expected to be the valedictorian. Or I think his example is good grades or to get into a prestigious academic university. Like it's this idea of we give you the gifted label and in return you give us these things. Yeah, it's a transaction. And to be honest, I kind of think that's what giftedness looks like for a lot of our learners. Would you guys agree with that? That there is this idea of if you are labeled gifted, there are things that you're expected to give back in return. Yes. Okay, perfect. So the alternative to this, and they can be happening at the same time. He talks a little bit about that, and you can go dig further into his work. It's so fascinating. But his alternative to this is this idea of transformational giftedness. And get this, he says transformational giftedness seeks to make a positive, meaningful, and possibly enduring difference to the world or on the world. I don't know why I can't talk all of a sudden. Basically, transformational giftedness is this idea of I want to use my giftedness to have an impact on someone else, or I want to make a positive impact on the world. And so it moves away from this idea of transactional giftedness or giftedness only being valuable in school. And it makes this shift into how do I use my gift to impact the world that I'm going to be going into? Or how do I impact others in a positive way? Y'all, that is huge, right? Just that mindset alone of like, how can we shift from transactional giftedness to more of a transformational giftedness approach? I feel like could have a huge impact on the gifted community and how we serve gifted learners. What do you guys think about that? What do you think about the difference between transactional and transformational giftedness? Is that something new? Gosh, yeah, probably. I think there are a lot of teachers that are transformationally gifted. Such a good point. Any other thoughts about this? I love this so much. I can't quit smiling. It's one of my favorite things to talk about lately. I just want to dig more into his work. I need to understand it more, but knowing what I know, I've heard him share. I just think that this is so good. Yeah, there's purpose behind it, right? It's not just like we're checking a box. This is a label that you get. Michelle says, love this idea, new to me. How old do the students need to be to understand this? Gosh, that's a good question. I don't know how old they need to be to understand the difference between the two, but I think serving them in a way that makes sense and serving them through a transformationally minded words, transformational giftedness. If we made that a priority with our gifted learners, I think that could start from the time they're identified until they graduate, right? I need a Dr. Pepper. All right. I love that definition of, yeah, it's so good. It's purposeful, right? So keep that in mind as we're talking about serving gifted learners with Genius Hour, because I think that it is really a way for us to shift from transactional giftedness to transformational giftedness. I said this earlier. I'll say it again. You have kids in your classroom, never going to do well on a worksheet, never going to do well on a test, but they can go home and put a card back together. And I just think that we are missing some of those kids because we're so busy looking at report cards and because we're so busy looking for the kids that fit into this box that we call school. And some of our gifted learners will never fit into that, which means they'll never be identified, which also means they'll never be served. And so those kids are missing an opportunity and missing that opportunity to be able to work on a project or do something that is transformational just because we are unable to see them. And that is not okay, right? We have to be willing to say that that is not okay. Okay, so just thinking about this, what I did here was I went into ChatGPT, my best friend, and I asked it to create. I just said, "Hey, what are some different types of giftedness? Could you list some different types of giftedness and explain what it means?" And I just wanted to do this so that you guys could see how many different types of giftedness there actually are. And this is, gosh, this list is not all of the different types of gifts, but I think it gives us perspective and being able to see there's a lot of different types of giftedness. So, intellectual giftedness, academic, creative, leadership, visual and performing arts, psychomotor giftedness, social giftedness, entrepreneurial giftedness, multilingual giftedness, mechanical giftedness. Like, just looking at that list, would you guys say, would you agree with me that there is a lot of giftedness that is going unseen and unsupported in the public education system? I'm going to wait and see what you guys think of that while I read some of your comments. So good. I love the comments. You guys keep them coming. Yeah, it's just and it gets overwhelming, right? We look at this list and it's like, Andy, like, how are we ever supposed to serve that many gifts? Like, how is that even possible? Like, there's no way that we could possibly have a program that would serve all of these different gifts. And I would just disagree with you, right? I would say there is a way to serve all of these gifts, but what it can't be is a one size fits all program. What it has to be is an opportunity for every learner to really take their gift and do something with it. It can't be, this is how we're going to serve gifted learners. It has to be, we're going to give gifted learners the time and space, and we're going to serve them in this really specific way. And so I think that's what we really want to think through, and that's what we want to consider is how do we get past this mindset of we have to have it laid out. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what you're going to do. And instead of dictating what they do in their GT programs, what if it was open ended enough that we could serve all of these gifts, right? What if we had a framework that within that framework, all of our learners could experience whatever it is that they're working on? They could utilize the gifts that they've been given, the gifts that they have, but they could use them in different ways to do different things. It sounds crazy, right? But I'm telling you, passion projects are a way to do that. It's not as hard as I think we sometimes think that it may be. Okay, so in order to kind of help you understand what this looks like, I've kind of created some scenarios. And I don't know if you guys know this or not. This is mind blowing. It has nothing to do with Genius Hour, but I feel like you need to know. We are at a time and place in education where you can go into Canva right now. And if you go into apps and you click Magic Media, so you're in Canva, you go to apps, you click on Magic Media, you can write a scenario, and then you can take that scenario and copy it into Canva, and it will create an image that did not exist before you wrote the scenario. Artificial intelligence will create an image and give you an image to match up with that scenario. That's crazy, right? That you can create an image that did not exist before that moment. Crazy. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a second to read this because what I'm going to do is share several scenarios with you. These are just examples of some different projects that students have done. So I'm going to let you guys read this. Yes, this goes way beyond the poster or the PowerPoint for sure. All right, so Jessica is gifted in the area of leadership, and you can see that her project goes well beyond a poster or a PowerPoint. Yes. All right, so let's look at the next scenario. Next, we have Liam. Creatively gifted and given the opportunity to create a storytelling platform. This is probably my favorite, Ethan. So a talent for the visual arts. And then next, I think we have two more. We have Emily, who has a specific academic ability. And then finally, we have Jordan. What are some things you guys notice about those specific passion projects? So as we looked at each one, what are some things that you noticed or that stood out to you as we kind of met each learner and read about their project? I really wish I could hear you guys. This platform just doesn't allow me to do that, but I can read your comments. So, what are some things that you guys notice about the scenarios that you just read and the different learners? Yeah, the projects have an impact beyond the walls of the classroom for sure, right? It's more than just I created a poster to help my peers learn about something, right? Basketball or whatever. They would need very specific mentors. Sherry, that's a great point. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Each passion project is reflective of the child's giftedness. That's key, right? Each project has to be a reflection of their gift. And it also gave them an opportunity to probably challenge themselves and work on some other things as well. Individualized makes you wonder, Amy, what this would look like in elementary. Good news, that's where I did Genius Hour or passion projects. It's very personal to them, and they showed mastery differently. Yeah, it wasn't all like they all created the same thing like a PowerPoint or Google Slides. They all showcased their learning in a really meaningful way that was really personal to them, unique to each student, and they reflected what they were passionate about. It reflected what they were passionate about. Perfect. So I put those in there, ChatGPT and Canva definitely helped me out, but I wanted you guys to be able to see some really specific examples of passion projects and why they're so important. So one of the things that has kind of been my passion project lately, and this thing is always growing and changing. It's a living document, but it's available and it's something you can check out. We'll talk about it again at the end. The only reason I wanted to show it to you here is Genius Hour goes well beyond just working on what they're interested in, right? Those projects are great and they're amazing, but then what are they gaining from that? And so I think we could consider the specific skills that can be addressed throughout the Genius Hour process. And so I've been working on, Kimberly, we're about to talk about that. Don't panic. We're getting there, I promise. We're going to talk about how do you find the time to make this a reality. So thinking about the skills enhancement suite, what this is just a collection of learning experiences, almost like a curriculum that you could use throughout the Genius Hour process so that they're not just working on a project. There's like a little mini lesson for each one of the skills. I created this not for it to go in order or not for you to use it in like I do this, then I do this. Andy said I do this. It's more of like a plug and play, right? Okay, my kids are struggling with problem solving. I'm going to pull in this learning experience. We're struggling with figuring out what we're passionate about. I'm going to pull in this experience. So it's a collection of, gosh, several, I think over 180 learning experiences for kids to really think through, work through. I can't remember the number now. I hope that's not off. It's been a long time since I've actually put that together. But if it's something you're interested in and would like to look at, I'd be happy to show it to you. And I actually have a place you can access more information about that I'll share at the end. But the reason I put it in here is to help you understand that whether you use my skills enhancement suite or something different, Genius Hour is an opportunity to not just work on an individual project, but to actually address so many of the skills that our gifted learners need. All right, so let's get to it. How do we do this in a manageable way? Some of you guys have heard of the 6 P's of Genius Hour. I think some of you are using them, but I want to talk to you about why this was so important and how it plays a role in managing this. So that whole question about, gosh, how do we have the time to do this? You have to have a framework. I can tell you that because I tried it without a framework. That was a really bad idea. I just was like, hey, I want to know what you guys are passionate about. You're going to work on a project. And gosh, while that was fun and while it was challenging, it was a complete mess. And I would say not even a meaningful mess. It was just a mess, right? And so I had to kind of create a framework that would make sense to my learners. And so I woke up in the middle of the night one night and I was like, you know what? Every part of this process starts with the letter P. And I got up, I wrote it on a sticky note. The next day I went in and I created a bulletin board. And it turns out a lot of people were looking for a process for Genius Hour. So if I had to sum this up to you guys, and we're going to talk through it, so just hold on. I would say that in my classroom, every learner kind of identified their passion and purpose. Then they would plan their project out. They would pitch their idea to their peers. They would work on a project to develop a product and ultimately give a presentation. Now, as that in that moment, I would tell you there was nothing else happening there other than this being a checklist or a roadmap of places they had to stop in order to make it happen. I would tell you that today I see it as a roadmap, not a checklist, but there are skills in each one of these parts that are so important to our gifted learners. And so what I'd like to do, I always say that, like what I'd like to do if you guys are okay with it, but even if you're not okay with it, I don't have any other slides. This is what we're doing. We're going to go through and I'm going to show you each part of the process. We're going to talk about some of the specific skills that it addresses. And then I'm going to talk to you guys about how you can do this so that it runs itself, right? So that you're not having to manage all of the projects. Hopefully that sounds good. Let's dive right in. Let's start with passion and purpose. Giving our kids the opportunity to figure out what they're passionate about and what their purpose is behind that passion is huge. And I think the key skill here, and what I did was focus on one key skill, is self-awareness, knowing themselves well enough that when you ask them what they're passionate about, they don't respond with, what do you want me to be passionate about? Because that is how my kids responded when I first told them we were going to do passion projects. And it broke my heart because I realized that my learners had become just as complacent and compliant as I had been as an educator. And they were just playing the game, right? Tell me what to do, when to do, where to do, how to do. And if nobody's there to do that, then they just didn't do. And so this idea of like, what are you interested in? What are you passionate about? They were like, we have no idea. Like, this is not how we play the game of school. Like, just tell us what to do. And I will tell you that when I first started Genius Hour, I was very much focused on passion. Doing the work that I do now and helping campuses and districts and teachers implement Genius Hour in a meaningful way, I would tell you that to not focus on purpose is not a good idea, right? Because what would happen oftentimes with my learners is their passion would fizzle out and they would want to move on to something else. But that's because we hadn't taken time to really build the foundation of the flame, which would be the purpose. And so I always say, I read a great article that talked about how if you build a campfire, you have to build the foundation really well. And if you don't build that foundation well, the flame is going to fizzle out fairly quickly. And gosh, for so long, that's what I did in my classroom. My students were excited. They were jazzed, but within a couple of weeks, they were done because that flame would fizzle out because there was no purpose behind the work. So let's talk about that. How do you create purpose behind the work? How do we give our learners an opportunity to think through that? I think you have to give them specific purpose buckets. If you've heard these before, stay tuned because there's a fifth bucket that those of you who know me well and follow my work do not know yet, unless you were part of the Great Teacher Alliance, and then you may know. All right, that being said, the first type of project is a mastery project. So the purpose behind this type of project would be to master a skill or a concept by doing. So maybe they want to learn a different language. Maybe they want to learn how to sew. Like there is something that they want to do and they want to learn how to do it well. Can you think of some of your kids and something that they're super interested in that might be a mastery project? I'm going to give you guys a second to think about that. Next would be a kindness project. So a kindness project is the opportunity to impact someone else in a positive way. So I'll give you an example. I had two students who were learning how to sew pillowcases, right? Those two students, I think one of them went to visit her cousin or somebody in the hospital, and she came back and she said, hey, the pillowcases in the hospital are terrible. And she said, I think that maybe we should not just learn how to sew pillowcases, but what if we sewed pillowcases for kids who are in the hospital? And that project turned from a mastery project of learning how to sew to a kindness project of learning how to sew so that they could impact others in a positive way. Do you see how that works? And do you see how this is connected to transformational giftedness? They're learning how to use the gift or the passion that they're working on to do something for someone else. It just such a cool experience, and was really eye-opening for those kids. I think innovation projects, those kids who really like to tinker or like to make things or create things, maybe they are mechanically gifted. Innovation projects are the opportunity to create something new or make something better, helping them understand that to innovate, you don't always have to create something that's never been created before. Sometimes it's about creating something new or making something better. The other thing is, that was a really weird thing to say. The next type of project is a perspective project. This is the opportunity to change your perspective or the perspective of someone else. So thinking about the way they see something or the way others see something, and working on a project that would help them look at that through a different lens. Look, I don't think this has to be a big deal. I think you definitely want to be careful about this and make sure that the projects are appropriate. I had a teacher email me recently and just said, hey, how do I know if a project is appropriate? And I said, when your students pitch, they're either going to get a red light, a green light, or a yellow light, right? Here's how that works. A red light means your project is unsafe or inappropriate or unsafe, which means you're not moving forward. A yellow light means I have some questions. There are some questions that have to be answered before you can move forward. So let's chat. And a green light means like, go for it. This is perfect. Move on, right? Do your thing. So I think that's a really great idea to, when your students pitch, you could even use like those, like garage sale stickers. I don't know where you guys live or if y'all have those, but here in Texas, we have garage sales, and we have at the dollar store, you can buy those stickers. And so green, yellow, red, give them one of those to let them know whether they can move forward, whether they need to answer some questions, or they need to come to a full stop and think about a different project idea. So perspective projects. And then finally, there are awareness projects. This is the newest one. I had somebody on Instagram message me and said, hey, I feel like this is one you need to add. And I thought it was a great idea. So I did. The opportunity to make others aware of an important issue or problem. Maybe at school, maybe there's a bullying issue and it needs to be addressed, or people need to be aware of it. Like taking time to create an awareness campaign about something that is going on. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. What do you guys think about those purpose buckets and how they might impact Genius Hour? Like, so often Genius Hour is just do what you want, work on whatever project you want. It's got to be more than that. I haven't come across a project yet that has not fit into one of these buckets. So what do you guys think? All right, Annie likes them. Perfect. Anybody else? You guys feel like it could help your kids make sense of kind of what direction they might want to go with their project, versus it just being like, I like the Dallas Cowboys. Like, I'm just going to spend my time always looking up things about the Dallas Cowboys. That won't work. There has to be action. Remember the difference between a Genius Hour project and a research project. All of these buckets result in action. Right. So purpose buckets, I like that, Amy. They provide focus. So hopefully these will be helpful for you guys to use. Yes, and it helps teachers think more broadly about the projects that you're working on or the projects that your students are working on, because it gives us the opportunity to see it from a different perspective. I'm going to give you guys a pro tip real quickly that I wasn't planning on giving, but I feel like I should. When you're coming up with ideas or helping your students come up with ideas, sometimes that can be really tricky. Like, gosh, okay, you enjoy doing this. This is something you'd like to impact, and this is the type of project you'd like to be. It's like putting puzzle pieces together. One of the things that I've done recently is I've gone into ChatGPT and I'll tell it, hey, this is what the student is interested in. This is what they would like to impact, and they would like for their project to be a kindness project, or they would like to impact others in a positive way, or they would like to make others aware of this issue. And I say, can you give me a list of project ideas for this student? And just like, it just gives me a list of project ideas, and then I can give those to the learner and say, hey, do any of these sound interesting to you? Brianne, that's a great question. I hope I said your name correctly. For young learners, here's what I would say. If I was doing passion projects in a K1 or 2 classroom, probably what I would do is I would have a wonder wall up, and I would let my students post what they wonder, and then we would vote on a project to do together. They can't vote for their own, or they're all just going to vote for their own, right? But we're going to pull one of those wonders off, whatever we vote on, and we're going to go through the 6 P's together. So you would do this as a class project. I think 3, 5, it can become group projects or possibly individual projects. But 6, 12, I honestly just think passion projects should only be individual. I don't think they should work in groups. So definitely something to think about. Yeah, Amber, I like that you said that. It makes projects more specific and actionable. Very cool. Brianne, did that make sense to you to kind of think through what it would look like with your littles? So you would still use the same process. You would just go through it together, which I think would be so cool. I really need to do it with kindergartners so that or first graders so that makes sense in my head. But I think that would be a really great thing to do. The next thing after they figure out their passion and purpose is they are going to plan their project out. Now, a lot of kids want to skip this part because it's like, I don't need to plan. I know what I want to do. Like they're just so excited about the work that they want to jump right in. But this is where executive functioning skills come into play, right? This is where they're working on time management. It's where they're working on kind of like that idea of task initiation, getting started with the work, organization. All of those things happen here in the planning part. So I'm so excited. I'm doing a thing with a school district here in my area, and we are doing family passion projects. So I am going to their school district. We have over 50 families that are coming to be a part of the day, and we are doing family passion projects together. And so they're going through the first 3 parts. We have family experiences for them to go through to bring them closer together as a family, help them understand their gifted learner. So they're going to figure out their passion and purpose as a family. They're going to plan their project out. And one of the things that I was telling one of the organizers today is I said, hey, I promise you on this part is where a lot of families are going to realize like, oh, executive functioning problems are a problem, right? Like this is not something that comes easily for our gifted learners. And so we were talking about how those family passion project days give us an opportunity today. Calls yard work. I love that. Those family passion projects give us an opportunity to not only help parents understand giftedness, but to let them work through a passion project together. And I am so excited about it. I absolutely can't wait. But we were talking about this part of planning and how this part's going to be a little bit difficult. They're going to have to work through some things as a family to get to the next part of Genius Hour. But executive functioning skills, definitely an important thing for our gifted learners to practice. One of the things that I shared today with LAUSD, and I wanted to put it in here because I don't always talk about this when I talk about Genius Hour, but if I was doing Genius Hour in my classroom today, this would 100% be a part of the planning process. This is not in the book. I did not think about this until after I wrote the book. So this is exclusive content you guys are getting. But one of the things that I would have my kids do is to set a goal. And I think with our gifted learners, we have to be really careful with goal setting because we were talking about today that oftentimes gifted learners see goals as a checklist, like, oh, done it, right? And that's not really how goals work. Goals are like, you're here, the goal is here, and there's some things that have to happen in between for you to get there, right? And our gifted learners don't always recognize that. They just think, I should already be able to do that. And so I like the idea of using this framework. So GOAL. I don't know why I spelled that for you guys. It's right there. You can see it. But basically this idea of how do I need to grow to move forward with my project? What obstacles will I need to overcome to move forward with my goal? What strengths will I need to apply? Like, what do I already have within me that's going to make this manageable for me to do? And then what do I need to learn? What's the information that I need to gain? I really like the idea of using this framework in the planning part so that our learners know this isn't going to be easy. You're not going to just check a box. Like there are things that have to happen between here and here for you to move forward with your project. What do you guys think about using the goal setting framework as part of the planning process? Again, that's not in the book. It's not something that I talk about all the time, but I felt like tonight it would be a really good opportunity to kind of help you guys understand that could be a part of the planning process, and I think would be really valuable for our gifted learners. Okay, I'm going to assume you guys are good with that. So after they have kind of figured out, oh, Marie says it looks perfect. Thank you. All right. So they have figured out their passion and purpose. They've planned their project out. The next thing that they're going to do is they're going to pitch their idea to their peers, right? They're going to be vulnerable and they're going to say, hey, here's what I want to do for my project. Here's kind of what I've learned, what I kind of want to learn about. Here's what I'm going to do moving forward. I love this because it gives our students an opportunity to practice a very specific form of communication, and that is giving and receiving feedback. And for a lot of our gifted learners, they don't have that ability, right? They're not always great at giving feedback. They say things like, how do you not understand that? And they're not always great at receiving feedback because typically their feedback is, oh my gosh, you're so smart, or that's right, that's the correct answer. And they need sometimes for somebody to be able to say, hey, you know what? I would challenge you on that. And I would say, that's probably not going to be the best idea. And for a gifted learner to hear that can be really valuable because then they have to pivot and think of something else, or they can decide to stick with their original idea and see if it works out. But giving and receiving feedback, I would say, is something that several of our gifted learners need to work on. And I think pitching their idea to someone else can be really, really valuable and a good way to make that happen. All right. So I call those three: passion, plan, pitch, kind of the prep work, right? They haven't even started their project. So passion, plan, pitch, that's the prep for the project. After those three, it's time to get after it, right? They're going to work on their project. So during this time, they're going to practice problem solving and risk taking. This is when they're just doing the work. It's when they're documenting their learning. And if you need a place for your kids to document their learning, I will show you something that I've created that you can check out at the end of our time together that I think would be really valuable for you. But just even if you don't want to buy something or you don't want to do something like that, you could have them just write on a blog, write in a journal. Like basically you just want them telling their story of their work. One of the things that I talk about often is when we think about portfolios, right, that our students are doing, whether it be part of your gifted program or how we're identifying giftedness. What do we often ask gifted learners, or what do we just ask learners in general to put into a portfolio? I'm going to give you guys a second. What are some things that we oftentimes ask kids to put into their portfolio? I'm not sure I set that up really well, but we'll see if you guys get there. Okay, I'm going to give you the answer. I think some of you are, yeah, their favorite assignment, Amy. Absolutely. Thank you for saving me there. Their favorite assignment or their best work, right? We say, hey, put your best work into your portfolio. And like, there's a problem with that because your best work doesn't tell the learning journey. It doesn't tell how you handle productive struggle. It doesn't tell the rest of the story. It may not talk about some of the skills you have that you didn't use on your best work. And I just feel like if that's all we want them to put in there, we're going to have a portfolio full of the same work, right? Like, I think what we want to see is, how does a kid respond when something is difficult? Sure, we want their best work in there. That's valuable. But to only include their best work, that makes no sense, right? Like, it should tell the story of their learning journey. And so I think having a passion project portfolio is a good idea, but we don't just want them to put the product. We want them to tell the entire story. Thinking about a product, we want our students to be flexible and adaptable. One of the things that I've started saying to educators, again, I wish I would have thought of this before I wrote the book, but one of the things that I've started saying is I would say here, what is your expected product? Because chances are the product that they decide to create or that they've set out to create may not be the reality. Right? They may decide they want to create a model volcano. And on Tuesday, when they come in, it may have fallen apart. That does not mean they don't get to participate in the showcase that night. I have had many teachers call me in a panic and say, I don't know what to do because this kid doesn't have a product. And I always respond with, yes, they do. There's always a product, right? There's always an outcome of the work that they've done. Now, it might not be the expected product. They might not have the model volcano that they set out to create, but is there an opportunity for them to reflect on what they could have done differently? Is there a way for them to think about it in a way that there's always an opportunity for them to have a product, an outcome of the learning. Now, if the only product you can see is that physical product, Sure, that's not there, but there's a product of the learning. And it's important that we help our learners know that even if the expected product doesn't come to reality, there's always an opportunity to think differently about that. So flexibility and adaptability are key here. And then the last part is presentation, right? And this is all about reflection. How well can they look back on their learning, make connections, and learn from that, right? It's not just remembering. I always say remembering is what I did and how. Reflecting is what I learned and why. And presentation is about, yeah, Jeffrey, like sharing their growth, right? And reflecting on their learning. So passion, plan, pitch, right? Those are kind of before the project actually happens. And then project, product, presentation. And I know we went through those really quickly. I really just wanted to kind of introduce some of you that haven't heard of that process. And here's what I would tell you if you're thinking about implementing this strategy, if you're thinking about using Genius Hour, if I was going to set this up in my classroom, I would create videos for each part of the process. So passion, plan, pitch, project, product, presentation. I would create a video of myself giving explicit instructions for each section. So, hey, you're on passion. Here's what you're going to do. And you give them kind of a broad overview of here's what you're going to do on this part. Here are some specific things that I need you to do. And you could even link all of the resources. So you could put that in your LMS, Google Classroom, Schoology. If you don't have those, you could create a Google site. You could create them on you could create a page on Google Sites for each one of the 6 Ps, and then you could create a QR code for each one of those pages. And every time they're on each one, they'll just scan the QR code. It'll take them to that page. They'll watch the video of you tell. So they don't even have to be in your classroom, right? And if they have questions, they can communicate with you. But this should run itself. That way, if it's an extension, right? If you've introduced the process, if you've shown your kids what Genius Hour is, maybe you did passion and purpose together. Every time they move past that, they just go access the resources in the LMS or on the website, and they work on their project because it's independent, right? They're working on their project. What do you guys think about creating a place where Genius Hour runs itself, like in your LMS or Google Sites? Does that make sense? And if that's something you need me to help you do, I would love to help you do that. I have some examples I can share with you. But I think I just think we get wrapped up in this idea of we have to be there with them. And we have access to too much technology to make that. That's not the reality. We don't have to be there. Do we have to give them a place, a house to go find it all in? Absolutely. Think of it as that, right? This is our Genius Hour house. This is the passion room. This is the plan room. This is the pitch room. And when they go in those rooms, if they're a guest at that house, everything that they need should be in that room for that part of the process. Yes. I've never really thought about it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. So, I would kind of think through it that way. Again, if you need help with that, I'm happy to help you. Okay, as always, I've gone over time, but I wanted to tell you this. If you want to learn more, a couple of ways you can do this. All right, you guys, I'm so excited. We are doing the first ever Genius Hour Academy in Waco, Texas on July 12th and 13th. 2 days of us just spending all the time together, right? 2 days of learning, also dinner together on July 12th. We're just going to hang out in Waco and go see all of the things, talk about passion projects in our town. I cannot wait, but we only have 50 spots because we just wanted to keep it small this year to figure out what this is going to look like. So if you'd like to come, we have a few spots left, not a lot, but the link on the page where you're watching this webinar, you can find more information there. And gosh, I'd love for you to be here. Genius Hour virtual book study. If you want to go through all of the content that we've talked about tonight at a slower pace and more detail, the Genius Hour book study is definitely something to check out. That skills enhancement suite we already talked about. If you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer. And then that kind of documentation piece that I talked about, I have Genius Hour student learning guides that you can check out as well. So those are all linked on that page. I do need you to do me a favor if you are still here. I want to make sure I say this for those of you that need credit. If you will, and I know this is a little extra, but if you need me to send you a certificate for you being here tonight or watching the video, I need you to just send me an email and I need you to say, I need a certificate for tonight. I plan on getting all of those done tomorrow. Hopefully it may take me a couple of days, but if you guys will send me your email address and just tell me you need a certificate. I will be happy to send one your way. We didn't do this in Zoom, so there's no way for me to figure out who all is here. And I don't want you to put your email addresses on YouTube comments for everybody to see. So just send me an email and I will email you the certificate. Gosh, the last thing I would say to you, I love this quote, is a ship in harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are built for. So if Genius Hour feels a little unsafe and a little risky, I would say that's how it's supposed to feel, right? Like that's what learning should feel like. If you're like me and you're just in a place in education where it feels like somebody turned out the lights and you need somebody to turn them back on, Genius Hour might just be the thing to make that happen. So as a way to identify gifted learners, serve gifted learners, create a process or a curriculum that kind of runs itself so that we don't have to manage all of those different types of giftedness. I think this is absolutely the answer, and I hope I've convinced you of that tonight. We have 2 more webinars coming up this summer. One on July 8th, we'll be talking about designing for depth, and on July 22nd, we'll be talking about a new idea that I've had that I just can't wait to share more about, and that's gifted onboarding. Finally, I would just tell you guys, I appreciate you. If you guys want to connect with me on Instagram or further, or you want to ask any questions about this evening, please make sure you get my contact information. I appreciate all of you so much. I am going to stop talking. If you have any specific, where do you find my email? That's a good question. It is right here. So my email address is here. So just send your need for a certificate to that email. And again, I'm probably not going to get to it tonight, but I will get to it tomorrow. I'll get those sent out to you guys so that you can document that you were here. All right. Email address is right here. Hopefully you guys can see that. It says mcnairandy@gmail.com. All right. I appreciate you guys so much. I never know how to say goodbye. My friends give me a hard time. They're like, you're terrible at wrapping things up. I really am. But please know how much you're appreciated. I hope you've signed up for the other 2 webinars. I'm so excited about them. I'm so excited about learning with you guys this summer. Please let me know if you need anything specific. I would love to support you in any way that I can. Again, please email me. Oh, yep. Go Mavs for sure. I'm not a huge Mavs fan, but my family here is always watching. So for sure, go Mavs. All right. You guys have a good evening. If you need anything, let me know. Janet, thank you. You're so sweet. Thank you so much. Yeah. All right. You guys have a good evening. I am going to hang out for a second. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Bye, Annie. I'm so glad you were here. Amber, I'll see you in the morning. Absolutely, I will. My LAUSD friends who are here this evening. I appreciate you guys because I know y'all had a long day. Oh, thanks, Elizabeth. All right, you guys, I'm going to sign off just because I cannot do awkward silence. It's a real problem for me. I have 0 wait time, but feel free to email me. Stay connected. I would love to continue to learn with you guys. Y'all get some rest this evening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye, y'all.